we are actually discovering more and more that we are far less awake than we think, even during the day. So it's actually quite rare that we are 100% awake. So there is now this concept of local sleep that is emerging, showing that actually even if we are awake and behaving like normally, like an awake person, if we are looking a bit like more precisely in the brain, we are actually realizing that some parts of the brain show some sleep-like patterns, while others show some wake-like patterns.
So I loved kind of reading and learning about your work on sleep and just looking at the field in general. But would you also tell me about the sleep onset period first? You have some interesting work on this. We study sleep, we study wake, but why is this area interesting?
Yeah, so it's quite true. So for now, well, not that much of research has been performed on the sleep onset period. Mostly, I think for many reasons. The first one being that it's a very short moment, so it lasts only a few minutes before you actually enter deep sleep, and so it's quite difficult to capture. And also, you may think, well, what interesting could really happen during this kind of very short and fleeting moment? And then also, because it's a sleep onset period, it's a sort of mixture between wakefulness and sleep. And then, like, most researchers don't really know what to do of it because it's neither wakefulness, it's nor sleep. So we don't really know what to do. So most of the time we actually just throw away these data and we don't analyze them, and we just analyze wakefulness versus sleep. So I think that's the main reason, because it's difficult. We don't really know what it is, and it's very short. So yeah.
Right, but it's kind of a fascinating area, as we talked about just sort of off the air before. I've been keep falling asleep to audiobooks, and you really think that I'm not going to fall asleep here. You can kind of even like understand what's going on, like I'm listening to something, and then it's kind of sudden, and oh no, I've fallen asleep.
Right.
And you have work on it, like kind of being interesting for creativity. So tell me a bit more about it, what we've learned about it.
Yeah. So we had some anecdotes from scientists and from artists. We were actually thinking that this period was conducive to creativity. So, for example, Thomas Edison, Salvador Dali, Albert Einstein. And so all of them actually developed a sort of technique to capture this moment. So because it's very short and then we fall asleep, we needed like a sort of technique to capture this moment. And so the anecdote is that they would take naps in an armchair. And they were so in very peculiar conditions. So they were in an armchair, but they were holding an object in one of their hands. So it could be a spoon, a small bottle, or some stuff like that, a pencil. And then the idea was that as soon as they would start falling asleep, their muscle would relax, and then it would cause a drop of this object on the floor. And the sun was actually waking them up, and they were writing down what was going through their mind at that time. And they actually would have attributed many of their discoveries and ideas to this technique. So this was kind of an anecdote and a legend, and we didn't really know whether it was true or not. So like 2 years ago now, we decided to test this. So we actually just mimicked the exact same conditions. So we gave participants, so it was arithmetic sequences, and they had to try solving them fast as possible. But what they didn't know is that there was a sort of trick, a sort of hidden rule within these arithmetic sequences. And we wanted to see whether or not some of them would discover this trick in a sort of eureka moment, depending on a nap, and it's basically and the sleep and wake stages in this nap. And so they had like several of these arithmetic sequences before and after a short nap. And so during the nap, they were basically in this condition, so micro nap technique, holding a small plastic bottle. And then they again had arithmetic sequences. And so the kind of amazing result was that after solely on average 1 minute spent in this sleep onset period, like most of the participants actually got an eureka, which was quite late after the nap, on this hidden rule. While like the person who actually remained awake, not that much actually found it. And what we didn't expect is what happened in some subjects who actually fell into deeper sleep. So they reached this sleep onset period, but then they actually fell asleep, so into the second sleep stage. And this person actually didn't find, most of them, this hidden role. So we were kind of surprised by this results because we were expecting the one on sleep onset, but we didn't really know about the deeper sleep. So our conclusion was that there might be a sort of creative sweet spot, and so to reach it, you will need to fall asleep, but then not go into deeper sleep. So that way, I think it was clever for Thomas Edison and Albert Einstein, etc., to have this technique because it prevented them from falling into deeper sleep.
Yeah, interesting. So it's if they actually fall asleep, that's kind of too much, and they kind of just need to be in that boundary.
Exactly. And we don't really know why for now. So it's one of the first studies. So we still need to investigate why the person who actually fell into deeper sleep, they don't have this boost. Maybe you need to wake up from a creative state. That would be sleep onset. Maybe you are forgetting some stuff that actually happened, or you lose the ability to retrieve them consciously. So
interesting.
Need to test it.
Right. So you could. I know with like even you're trying to remember dreams and things. Sometimes like you kind of remember it if you're in that just kind of waking up. But if you fall back asleep, sometimes it can kind of go. So okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's interesting. You talk about like the reason why you planned the study like that is because you have like historical figures who might even do this to spur creativity, like hold something in their hand and let it fall.
Yeah.
I wonder, have you ever tried using these findings of sleep onset creativity for yourself? Like in me reading it, I was like, should I do this? But it just seems kind of painful because if I'm tired, I just want to sleep.
Yeah.
Kind of waking yourself up. Yeah,
I understand. So I actually was using it on myself, but kind of differently. So this is also a different question. So here we were studying sleep onset, but actually we couldn't distinguish it from sleep offset because it's the only stage they are in. So for us, we could say that the results are attributed to sleep onset, but also to sleep offset because it's the same thing, kind of the same thing. It's one stage, so it's the same. And so I was using a different technique. So I was sleeping normally, but then I was putting an alarm in the morning, a soft alarm, and I was just like when it rings, I was keeping my eyes closed, and I was trying to stay within this kind of hybrid state. So kind of being conscious, but not too much, trying to really like kind of enjoy this sort of sleep inertia, and then take advantage of it to think about some problems I wanted to solve, like questions to answer. And it really worked well. So I was using it to write my thesis manuscript, actually, when I had like a problem, how to discuss this result or something like that. I was waking up, but then I was staying within this state. So kind of sleep onset, sleep offset, but which could be the same as sleep onset because they share many similarities in terms of brain activity and using it. But you could also use the short naps, but you need to be well rested because otherwise you're going to skip the sleep onset period. So it was some problems. So in the group we had about participants who actually fell into deeper sleep. Some participants actually dropped the object and then they didn't retrieve it. So they had nothing to prevent them from really falling asleep. And we also had some participants because in lab settings, we are asking people before they come to the lab to sleep a bit less most of the time because we want to increase the likelihood that they would fall asleep on the day of the experiment. And so some of them were too tired. And so if you are too tired, then you're going to skip the sleep onset period and directly fall into deeper sleep. So you need to be well rested. And then it's what we say, we differentiate the power nap from a kind of recreational nap, which would be the one on creativity. So it's not to be well rested and to regain some energy, but it's more like really for creativity purpose. Yeah.
Interesting. So yeah, it's fascinating that the sleep, like going into sleep and coming out of it, it's kind of a similar thing, right? And you could try either. And then if I wanted to try it, interesting, kind of actually doing it to wake yourself up from sleep. Again, still kind of painful, but yeah, it's, but interesting.
Less painful then.
yeah. At least you've fallen asleep and you kind of you're somewhat well
rested. At least you slept.
Relatedly, you kind of have some interesting work in thinking about, well, given that the sleep onset period is quite interesting, this boundary between wake and sleep, what does it tell us about both sleeping and the waking state? You know, how should we like think about them and like separate them? Like how different actually are they? What exactly is sort of going on in either?
Yeah, so for like in the last years, we were thinking, okay, so sleep and wakefulness are really different, and we have this kind of binary view of them. But now, like more work are emerging, trying to like saying that actually there might be a sort of continuum of states, of kind of hybrid states with like different degree of hybridity. So it's really like a new emerging concept saying that we should completely actually reconsider our view of wakefulness and sleep, and especially that we are actually discovering more and more that we are far less awake than we think, even during the day. So what it's actually quite rare that we are 100% awake. So there is now this concept of local sleep that is emerging, showing that actually even if we are awake and behaving like normally, like an awake person, if we are looking a bit like more precisely in the brain, we're actually realizing that some parts of the brain shows some sleep-like patterns, while others show some wake-like patterns. And this is dependent on what you are doing. So it's what we call homeostasis. So basically, if you're using a large part of your brain, then it's more likely that this part of the brain will show sleep-like patterns compared to other brain regions. And what is also emerging is that this local sleep could also explain some phenomenon like mind blanking, mind wandering. So when you think like, oh, okay, you are getting lost in your thoughts, well, it might be explained by the fact that some parts of your brain are actually do some local sleep. And what is really interesting is that you can even predict. So if you record this, so kind of slow waves that are the sleep-like patterns, you can actually predict the behavior of your participants. So whether or not, for example, they are going to miss a trial that they were expected to perform, or on the contrary, they are going to rush, and so that would be a bad trial. So you can predict their behavioral response, but you can also predict what they will be not exactly the content, but a kind of the phenomenology of their phenomenology. So, for example, would they be focused on the task? Would they be mind wandering? Would they be mind blanking? And this would be depending on the region of where this local slow waves are actually detected. And this can be done trial by trial. So really like a few second by few seconds, you can actually predict what your participant will do depending on the location and presence of this slow waves. So
It's fascinating that, you know, as you say, people, you know, not only their brain regions sort of turn off, which can kind of might help explain why you feel tired, you know, I just cannot solve certain things, or you just kind of feel like there's no point even trying one certain task. It kind of feels like there's an increase in effort to try and use, say, particular parts of my brain. Not that I have like direct access to what parts of my brain I use, but you know, this kind of feeling that, okay, I'm using, like, I'm not at full capacity here. And it's interesting too, like what then does it, the fact that we might daydream things, and then it seems like that means other kind of brain regions are sort of turned off, tell us about what sleep is. Is like the reason why we have creativity or even dreams themselves, like to do with like kind of narrow attention and or, you know, what does it tell us about kind of what is going on in sort of helping that creativity?
Well, for now, we don't really know, but I think that it's my hypothesis. I think that all this situation that actually are likely to trigger this kind of local sleep or short sleep intrusion, sleep onset, etc., are like all the situation where we take a shower, we walk, and we think about something else. All the situations that are actually associated with kind of creative bursts. Also, we name it incubation in the models of creativity. So when you think about a problem, you cannot solve it. And then you go walking, you think about something else. So you incubate this problem, and then you have this eureka. So I think that the kind of common denominator between all of the situations could be local sleep intrusion that could explain this creative burst for many reasons. So when we fall asleep, again, it's not an all or none phenomenon where you suddenly fall asleep. It's like a switch off and on. And it's not like that at all. It's actually really progressive. And non-linear, so you have like a lot of fluctuation between different states. It's really complex, actually, what happens in this very few minutes. And your brain is actually not falling asleep all at once. So you also have like some regions that are actually awake, while others are starting falling asleep. So, for example, what we now know, and like a lot of studies show it, is that you have a sort of anterior to posterior gradients in your brain when you're falling asleep. So the first region that actually fall asleep are the frontal ones. And then you have like this kind of progressive progression to like posterior regions. So, and that could explain why this creativity burst, because the frontal regions are known to be kind of the master and of logic, and like kind of, they are important, but then they kind of restrain you to like go to the same path and the same direction, because based on your experiences, this is what works. And so you're not trying to other paths and other directions. So if you deactivate then these frontal regions, but at the same time you still have others that are activated and you're still a bit conscious, etc., that may be the ideal cocktail too for this creative burst. So,
yeah, it's interesting you kind of bring up, in general, how do we have insight and solve problems? And there's good work on insight and how distractions and small distractions and like being slightly off task can help you solve problems. And it is interesting. Does that, with your hypothesis, does that maybe help us like have different brain regions have a break, or just even like even mini sleeps? It's interesting. I on this on the notion then of, I'm wondering, so, in sleep itself, is the sort of front of the brain, the sort of cortex and things, is that in general as well less active? Like, and is that like,
is there a what, sorry?
During sleep, like itself, like in dreams and things, is that less active, the front of the brain as well?
Oh, the front, yeah. But then it depends also on sleep stages. So for a long time, the paradoxical or REM sleep was really associated to creativity, because here you have a sort of activity that is quite similar actually to wakefulness, but you still have some regions that are different. So, for example, all the regions that are important for emotion are super activated, even sometimes more than during wakefulness, during REM sleep. We think that it might be involved in emotional regulation. So you're actually reactivating recent memories, but at the same time regulating emotion. And then it would be important to be, when you're awake, then to deal with this kind of very intense and emotional memories. But yeah, for example, in REM sleep, it is less activated with this frontal region. But actually REM sleep and the sleep-onset period are quite similar also in terms of activity. Even so that some researchers actually hypothesize that the two are the same stages, and just one is actually lighter than the other one, and it's kind of a failure of. We wanted to enter REM sleep, but it's a failure, and actually we actually went into other sleep stage. So sort of lighter REM sleep, but other researchers think that it's really different. So it's still under debate.
Yeah, interesting. On the topic then of like sleep itself, and we might not have done work on it, but in terms of even like the phenomenology of dreams and how we experience them, is it a kind of insight and problem solving? Like do you have any sense for sort of understanding
during the dreams?
Yeah, during actual dreams,
based on the content. So it's another question. So there has been some studies showing that there is a massive link between obviously your memories and your wakefulness experiences and what you're dreaming about, which is what we also observed even at sleep-onset, which was quite cool. And we actually confirmed other results here. Well, where we actually obtained that 1/3 of the reported mental content that we had during the sleep-onset period were actually related to these arithmetic sequences. So the person were actually dreaming about the digits that made up the arithmetic sequences. They were hearing the sound of this digit, a lot of stuff like that. So that's kind of a first argument that could be important, because if you, for example, fall asleep trying to solve a problem, if you reactivate it and reprocess it during sleep, then you increase the likelihood of solving the problem. Then we actually tested for that, but we didn't find any link between the two. So are those people who actually dreamt about the task more likely to experience this eureka? We didn't find any link, but it's really tricky because to study dreams in general, because participants may forget that they actually dreamt about the task, and though they don't report it, although it's less likely with sleep onset because there isn't that much time. But still it can happen. Also, some people actually report some mental content that we judge that are not related to the task, but we actually, perhaps it is related, because we know that dreams are super hyper associative. And so we think, okay, it's not directly related to the task, but maybe for dreams, it was like there was a link, but that we didn't detect. So it's really difficult to study dreams for many reasons. And to answer this question, but there was also a study, like just a questionnaire study. And I don't remember exactly the number, but it was quite amazing that they asked participants, well, does it happen to you that dreams actually help you solving some problems? And then it was like 80% of them, at least once in your life, 80% of them or something like that. And then on a regular basis, it was like half of them. So like 500 persons were actually interviewed, and like half of them were saying that dreams were helping them solving problems on like a kind of regular basis.
Interesting.
So we kind of know that there is a link, and that we are reprocessing during sleep. Also, we have like thousands of people now showing that sleep is super important for memory reprocessing, and we think that there is a sort of tight link between memory reprocessing and creativity, because obviously, like, creative bursts do not come out of nowhere; they are based on some stuff, and so you need to reprocess the information that are needed to solve a problem to find a solution to your
right.
problem. So.
Yeah, it's fascinating to actually, like, we know sleep is associated with many good things and memory and problem solving, but then to actually go like exactly like what is going on in that creative period, and like exactly how are people solving problems. And it's interesting because, people might report like, they've reported having problems solved through dreams and things, but that's also only what like they sort of consciously see. Exactly. But who knows what problems, and we know that when you don't sleep, and people that are sleep deprived, they die basically. Especially and it's not even that long, so it's like there's something essential to it. And I wonder if part of that is you just have no way to, you need periods of just massive insight and just ability to like see things completely differently. Interesting.
It's also super important for immune system and for many different reasons, but we don't know if there is what is like the function, for example, of dreams. We have a lot of different hypotheses, and that all with many papers like kind of backupping each of them, but we don't know if there was like one big function at the beginning, and then like all the remaining ones are actually kind of consequences of this one or not. So we don't know that much about dreams because it's really difficult to study, which is why in my PhD we have used this lucid dreaming model. I don't know, because like studying dreams is a nightmare. Studying sleep is quite difficult because you need to stay awake, and like there are like a lot of difficulties, and people need to fall asleep in labs, etc. But studying dreams is even harder because at least for sleep we had like sort of brain signature, and it's easy to say, oh, like the person is sleeping and the person is in the sleep stage, and we have like this criteria and they are accepted and validated. But for dreams, we don't have any brain signature of dreams. We cannot say, oh, okay, this person is actually dreaming. We don't know.
Right.
There is like a high probability of this person like being dreaming because she is in REM sleep, and we know that if you awake participant in REM sleep, you have this percentage of this likelihood of having dreams. But we actually cannot say in real time this person is dreaming and is dreaming about that. We're starting to have like dream decoder, but it's working a bit on sleep onset actually. But so it's a nightmare. And so we need to find some, it's a nightmare because they forget, because we don't have any markers on, we don't know when they are dreaming, and we don't have any markers of dreams on our EEG recordings of the brain. So it's a nightmare. So that's why I don't know if you want to talk about lucid dreaming, but that's a way of kind of circumventing these obstacles. So
right, I was going to ask. So in your PhD, you were kind of, if people lucid dreaming, like by almost definition, they're kind of remembering their dreams and then they're conscious in it. So that's I mean, I guess it's interesting. So can lucid dreaming, is that something which can kind of spur creativity, and like what studies, what have we been finding about that specifically?
Yeah, so on creativity per se, it could actually. So I studied like patients with narcolepsy, so who are like this person who actually fall asleep all the time. So they have sleep attacks during daytime, and so like this kind of excessive daytime sleepiness. And we were wondering, could this actually trigger over the time and increase creativity? Because it would make sense, because first they have this increased access to sleep onset, but also another characteristic of this participant is that of this clinical population is that they fall asleep rapidly into REM sleep, which normally never occurs in like healthy subjects. So you need to sleep for 1 hour and a half before actually reaching REM sleep. But then in patients with narcolepsy, you can just have like 5 minutes and then they are in REM sleep. So we thought, well, maybe because they have this privileged access to sleep onset, also to dreams. So they remember their dreams a lot, and they are like massive lucid dreamers, most of them. We thought, well, could this actually help increasing their creativity over the time? So we actually tested it back when I was doing my PhD in Paris. So I had the chance to have one supervisor who was a doctor, so I could actually work with patients with narcolepsy. And so we recruited them, and I was administrating them first questionnaires on creativity, so creative achievements and some creative profiles, but also creative tests. So we have a bunch of different creative tests. So for example, we say that in creativity we have two main dimensions, what we call the divergent dimension. So it's basically we give you an instruction and you have to try to find as many different ideas as possible. So I give you this form and you have to find as many different drawings that would include this given form, for example. So that's the divergence dimension. But then we also have the convergent dimension, which is kind of the opposite. So I give you several forms and you have to integrate them within a single production, all of them. And we think that creativity is kind of a mixture of the two, because the definition of creativity is to try to find something new, so to go into a new direction, but at the same time, it has to be adapted to the environment, to constraints. So it's not enough to just go into like different direction and do like whatever. You need to kind of have a purpose on it, and it needs to be adapted to something. So that's the two dimensions. So I actually administered tests that were actually testing both of them. And what we observed is that indeed patients with narcolepsy had higher scores than healthy subjects on creative questionnaires, but also on the creative test. So, and also what was interesting is that it was actually correlating with their sleepiness. So basically the more severe their disease was, the higher their creativity. So this was a kind of first line of argument saying, and also for the lucid dreamers, to answer your question, those were actually lucid dreamers were also more creative than non-lucid dreamers within the population of patients with narcolepsy. So that's first line of argument saying that it might be important.
Fascinating. So study people who constantly falling asleep and just have more sleep, and then in general they're more creative. But then as well, if you look specifically at like lucid dreamers, that seems to increase creativity. Yeah, it's weird. I'm noticing there's like an interesting tension then that actually like being really awake, being really alert can sometimes like not be helpful, which is just kind of funny if we're always trying to have caffeine and make sure we need to be focused and ready, but then like it's I mean, my own life, I'm kind of noticing there are some tasks which are just better in like the morning when it's more I just need to do something and just. But then like more creative things, I'm like, actually I don't feel like I really got much into this task, and maybe that was better left in the evening. And I know like listening to people like Andrew Huberman talking about how actually the morning is just a better time period to do things that are more raw and algorithmic, and you kind of know what you have to do. So it's just an interesting dimension for people wanting to enhance creativity and understand even what creativity and problem solving is. That because I mean it's people with narcolepsy, they're constantly falling asleep. So in some ways it's good, but I mean, why does that happen to them? Is it an ailment, like a bad thing, or is it like something that like maybe naturally they're like an evolution? Some people are gonna have this trait.
No, so it's because they have a specific destruction of some neurons that are actually producing like this neurotransmitter that is called hypocretin or orexin. And so this neurotransmitter is actually so important because it projects back to wake promoting areas. So they have like a specific destruction of these neurons that is actually causing this imbalance between wake and sleep regulation. So it's actually a disease and it's a problem and it's very debilitating for them. Like some of them, they cannot have like a job because they are falling asleep all the time. And also there is another so we have there are different types of narcolepsy. So narcolepsy type 1 and type 2. In the type 1, they have what is called cataplexy. So it's basically a sudden loss of muscle tone. And most of the time it's actually triggered by emotions. And so this is a massive problem because, for example, I had one patient who was like a professional pianist, and then he had to stop his job, and it was really his passion, and because he couldn't play anymore because every time he was playing, he had like this positive emotion, and so he had cataplexy, so sudden loss of muscle, and so then he fell. So it's really like it's not a good thing at all, but at least with this study, we had like the chance of giving them like this kind of silver lining to it, saying, okay, it's a disaster. And fortunately, we have some treatments that for some of them work well. I'm not a doctor, but from what I saw, I'm in medicine, but at least you have like this kind of superpower on lucid dreaming and creativity. I don't know if it's, but it's still a kind of a positive. So I would suggest not to have this, but more like this these short naps and like enjoying like the sleep-onset.
And the reason they have that loss of muscle tone, is that just because like that's kind of what happens when we fall asleep, like we lose that. So is that kind of like
it's what we think. Yeah, it's related. Also, when we are in REM sleep, which they actually reach really quickly, we have like a complete muscle atonia. So we are completely paralyzed, which is handy because this is the moment when we are dreaming and we have like this most like bizarre dreams. And so if we were to actually make our dreams true in reality, it would be a problem. So it's good that we are paralyzed at that moment. And there is actually another disease where a patient actually enact their dreams in reality. So kind of painful for boyfriend or girlfriend next to them.
Or even like sleepwalking. Yeah, it's kind of it's you don't. Yeah,
also,
you don't realize. With narcolepsy, do we know if it's a genetic thing or can people develop it, or how is it the damage?
So I don't know much about the detail. I know that it's an immune reaction. So it's basically your immune system that think that this hypocretin neurons are actually foreigners, and they want to say, okay, no, it's dangerous. We have to delete them and to destroy them. But actually they were part of your own system and they were important. And there are like different, I think the genetics, and also there was like something after vaccination from what I understood. So like different factors, but I'm not an expert on like the different factors.
Interesting. Well, this conversation's been fascinating. I don't have anything more to explore. But if there's any last things you want to say, or else, where can people find your work? Thanks, Celia.
Yeah, it's okay for me. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. I'll put links to like some Google Scholar and just some of the articles you talked about. Okay. Awesome.
Cool. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.